Does a forensic download of the surviving roommates' phones indicate innocence in the Idaho4 case? Well, potentially yes, and that's why investigators take forensic downloads. So one of the things that's actually really interesting is there's been this small conspiracy about the surviving roommates and how they were texting during the murders. And one of the things that should have hit me a hell of a lot sooner was the fact that a forensic download was taken of the surviving roommates' phones almost immediately by investigators. And why is information like this important? Well, let's get into it. If the surviving roommates were using their phones at the times in which they believe that these crimes were committed, it's almost beneficial for them. Now, we the public don't understand why the individuals were using their phones at the times that the crime were committed. It was more than likely to have found out what noise was going on inside of the home. And the main reason why it's the two surviving roommates that are texting is because the other individuals, unfortunately, inside of the home have succumbed to injuries that have led to their death. For example, we understand that Dylan wakes up to some kind of noise, and that may indicate that she's actually waking up to the end of the attack going on upstairs. And this may simply leave her with a distorted view of what's actually going on, and simply could have sent a text just to see what the noise was upstairs as she wanted to go to sleep. She's more than likely not going to assume that her friends upstairs are being murdered because of a small noise that's woken her up. And as we know, the accused killer used a K-bar, which is also a silent weapon, in helping to do the crimes that it was that he's accused of committing. They could have simply all been in a group in WhatsApp, and sending a text to that entire group would have led no response from Kaylee and Maddie because unfortunately upstairs they've just been attacked and killed. And no response to this could have been one of the reasons why Dylan went to her door to check what the noise was coming from upstairs. But one of the things that's important here is that Dylan could have been texting Kaylee and Maddie to see what's going on upstairs and wouldn't have necessarily needed to have texted Ethan and Xana. It's just an assumption that these individuals could be in a group chat together, or that she could have individually texted them. Then from what we know, the accused killer comes downstairs and unfortunately attacks Xana and Ethan. The distorted noise now coming from down the hallway may have led Dylan to have somewhat believed that the noise from upstairs could have been from down the hallway, and that's what led her to start texting Xana and Ethan. But as we know, Xana and Ethan are being attacked. And because of this, Bethany downstairs may have been alerted to some sort of noise going upstairs, and that's what led between the text between her and Dylan. As these are the only two people that are able to communicate in the house, as the other four members have been attacked and are either dead or dying from the wounds that they've received. Now, this is all just somewhat assumption, as we the public don't understand anything that's actually gone on yet because of a gag order. But what's important here is if they are using their phones, the forensic download that the investigators can receive from this. Basically, inside of your iPhone and inside of your health app is actually something that records data for forensic investigators to be able to get into later on. It's not something that's accessible to the public like you or I. It takes a specific phone and specific download in order to retrieve this type of information from an individual's phone. And this is primarily important because if an individual is actually holding their phone and, for example, like Dylan was to go upstairs at any point, the forensic download will actually show investigators this. Now, it's unknown to the public what it actually is that they receive, but there are certain bits of data that are really interesting. They could actually calculate what floor the iPhone was on when it was being used. And one of the ways that they do this is recorded data inside of the iPhone. For example, if I was to be holding my iPhone and I was to be going up a flight of stairs, because I'm moving and going up a flight of stairs, if the phone was to recognize an elevation of 3 meters, it will recognize that I've gone up a floor. So while holding my phone, if I was to go up a flight of stairs onto another floor, the phone will actually detect this through elevation. One of the ways that the phone will not detect elevation is if I was in a lift. Now, lucky in the Idaho4 home that they didn't have a lift inside. But if I was to be inside of a lift and my phone was in my pocket and I wasn't to be moving, the iPhone wouldn't necessarily detect that I was actually going up an elevation. Therefore, the iPhone wouldn't be able to detect that I was going up flights of stairs or down them. And this is kind of important because this proves to investigators the steps that Dylan may have taken when giving over her version of events to investigators later on. Because the fitness app inside of her phone will show the steps taken by the individual and if she took any steps upstairs or downstairs during that night. It will show the steps that she took the morning of the incident when she woke up and then went and rang the police later on. It will also show all of the indication between what she did that morning, how many steps she took, and if that matches the story that she actually gave investigators. And one of the things that's important to take into accountability is they have a forensic download of both Brian Kohberger's phone, Dylan Mortensen's phone, Bethany Funk's phone, and Brian Kohberger sits apprehended behind bars. The iPhone's recorded data inside of the phone that Dylan wouldn't have been able to have manipulated will show investigators her exact route the night of and the morning of when the murders were committed. This gives investigators a version of events without the person they're questioning knowledgeable to what it is they're being questioned about. So when it comes down to conspiracy and if these individuals could have outsmarted the FBI as well as the police through forensic download, then there's absolutely no way possible. Even if one of the individuals from the frat house was actually there that morning and went and found one of the bodies, a forensic download of his phone too would have been able to have shown the elevation between what he took in his steps from getting to the home, upstairs, finding the body and coming back down. It will kind of show a complete depicted route of how that person acted in the morning through their step counter as well as through elevation. So if there was any cleanup going on and these individuals had their phones on them like we know because they obviously rang investigators, this then proves that the version of events that has been given to investigators is true by all accounts. Seeing as they wouldn't have been able to have manipulated the health app inside of their phones that a forensic download would have given to investigators to be able to analyse the steps taken that night and that morning. Now these things are unknown how some of the investigators do some of these tactics, as they don't really want people to figure things like that out and be able to manipulate it further on later down the line. But understanding that a forensic download has been taken through what we've been given so far as evidence is highly important in trying to understand the innocence of two individuals up against something as dramatic as this. Accusation and theory runs wild, but one of the things that people seem to not take into accountability is the fact that we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle yet. And something that's really interesting is right now they're fighting all the smaller bits of evidence that don't really matter too much in court later on. All of the things that they have that they've wrapped up the accused killer for, we don't even know yet. We don't know a sliver of the main bits of evidence that they hold against the accused killer, yet people think that soon enough he's going to walk. Even though he's tried on technicalities time and time again and has been denied over and over. Even with his masters in criminal justice, he still can't seem to get out of his small technicalities. He's not exactly fighting the evidence, he's fighting technicalities. But we'll get into a more in-depth detail about that in the next video. Hope some of this helped, and if it did, then feel free to drop a like and a follow, and if not, then have a nice day.